Okay, I show it's 9 o'clock, and I want to welcome everyone that's joining, and Christina will continue admitting you as you're coming in. Today we're changing our format just a little bit. We're using our regularly scheduled collaborative time, and we're going to welcome our Lincoln Learning team. They're the great minds behind the content that you've been using with the digital curriculum. And so we're going to preserve that time, and we're just going to quickly go over our norms and then hand it off to them. We have 90 minutes planned of really good structured excitement. You're going to be admitted in listen only mode, so there's a little bit more structure today. You can put your questions in the chat box, and we have moderators that will be moderating the chat box. When it's the right time, we will, if you want to ask a question, we can unmute you, and then you'll be allowed to ask your question directly to the Lincoln team. Today is more focusing on Lincoln Learning and the Buzz Learning Management than it is about anything one roster. So I ask you to possibly save those questions and save them for me after the Zoom meeting if you have a specific rostering question. So with that, I'm going to mute myself and stop share and hand it over to our Lincoln team.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you let me know if you can see? Well, let me see if I can get smart enough here. Did that work? Are you able to see a PDF, Kathy?
Yes, you can see a PDF.
Okay, I still think I did that wrong. Give me 1 second. We are not typically used to Zoom, so I apologize for that. Is that better, Kathy? If I switch tabs, can you see all tabs?
I can see, yep, I can see you're switching to different tabs.
Okay, perfect. Yep. First time I think I did just the one part, not the whole thing. So welcome. My name is Casey Sadler. I'm here from Lincoln Learning Solutions. I am part of our professional development team alongside Lindsay Brandon, who will be one of our moderators. I'm going to be your primary presenter today, so I'll be using the screen most of the time, but we also have, as I said, Lindsay Brandon, who is going to introduce herself here in a moment. And Sandy Brown has also joined us from Lincoln Learning Solutions. She's part of our operations and our sales team, and she will be also keeping an eye on that chat, I'm sure, along with that APSRC team. And then also presenting alongside me is our special guest today, which is Kathy Cerminera, and she's part of our educational solutions team. So she's going to also be presenting. So I'm just going to take a minute and pass the introductions over to each of those team members. A little bit about myself before we get too far into it. I come to you with as a recovering algebra teacher, both in classroom and online. And I've worked with the organization approximately 15 years. So I'm hoping that background and support will help you. And for those who are thinking I'm just secondary, I'm also the mother of an elementary student and a middle school student. So I hopefully bring some of those viewpoints your way, along with some other interesting backgrounds you'll get to know throughout the session. Lindsay, you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lindsay Brandon. I am part of our professional development team, as Casey said. And I have been with Lincoln Learning for about a little over 6 years now. I actually worked in our curriculum department prior to our professional development team. So I do have a background in our curriculum development and had a part in making some of the curriculum that you've been using. So I'm going to bring that side of things to today's session. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, San. And again, Lindsay will be moderating the chat. And I'll be checking in with her periodically. So please feel free, if you have questions, definitely write them into chat. And if you need to unmute, let us know in that chat as well. Alongside her, we have Sandy Brown, who will also be hopefully helping moderate some of those questions. Sandy, you want to say hi and introduce yourself as we might direct some things, or you may jump in. I want to make sure they know all of our voices slightly apart. Sandy?
It's on the bottom left.
Perfect. Can you hear me now?
And we can, thank you.
Perfect. I couldn't unmute myself. I apologize. My name is Sandy Brown. As Casey mentioned, I work with our sales and operations team here at Lincoln Learning Solutions. I have been here for approximately 6 years. I came in with the curriculum development instructional design team. Prior to Lincoln, I taught middle school and high school, and then also worked in higher ed with the curriculum development instructional design. So super excited to be here. More than happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you, Sandy. And Kathy, will you take a moment to introduce yourself? Because after we go over our light agenda, we're gonna pass it over to Kathy for the official opening of our components. So Kathy, a small introduction.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kathy Cerminera, and I'm a solutions specialist here at Lincoln Learning. I've been with the company for about 15 years as well. I started off as a Spanish teacher and worked a lot with our instructional service team. And now I'm happy to be in the role and service the role as a solutions specialist. So looking forward to today's session.
Thank you, Kathy. So as we get started, I want to cover a couple things here. As we said, we have a pretty packed agenda. We are going to provide a takeaway, and we'll throw that in the chat a little bit later on. And that takeaway is going to look a little bit something like this. It's 11 pages we pulled together. It covers our overall agenda. As we said, Kathy's going to jump into some of these opening components, but you're going to see 6 session topics. It's going to include what are the defaults I can expect? What kind of edits can I make in assessments? Where can I find and how can I use Mastery Assessments analytics? How can I support students who join mid-year? How can people help me? How can the people area help me across my courses? And of course, what's new in the upcoming school year? We want to ensure, though, that this is a Q&A, that we reserve about 30 minutes. So if we don't get to all these topics, you're going to have this detailed information as a follow-up. So you'll see we tried to state the question, identify a scenario, and give you some considerations and talking points here, along with some clicks outs to some of our already created resources. So we wanted to make sure we were trying to be as thorough as possible, and we'll keep an eye on that time. In this resource, around page 8, I believe, you will also find resource topics. So these were things that we have worked closely with the APSRC, and these are topics that we knew we would not be able to also cover in this session, but we want to make sure you have those pieces and materials and support items at your fingertips. So things like creating assessments from scratch. We have a wonderful full job aid here. Hiding content and quick tips for that. Finalization, why? What does that mean? Why do I want to finalize? And then again, things like mastery course versus derivative section, grading periods, gradebook tips, and reset tips. So we will try to get through as much as possible. We do want to make sure we give you time to ask questions. And then I'm going to go ahead and pass that over to Kathy. I'm going to go up to the top and we'll talk a little bit about this opening and a little bit about this satisfaction survey, that evaluation that we're really looking for from you.
Well, thank you, Casey. I first just want to open and just say what a pleasure it has been working with the APSRC and all of the districts here in Arkansas. Every week when we check in, we are amazed by how well and how involved you are with using the LMS, the Buzz LMS and the Lincoln content. We hope that you have found that using an LMS can really enhance your teaching in many ways. So maybe you're using it for differentiating your instruction. Maybe you've gotten into, using that groups and organizing your classroom in a way that you can reach your remote learners and also the students in your classroom. We hope that this experience is giving you the synergy that you needed to kind of have all of your content in one place and all of your resources in one section. And so we hope that this is supporting your everyday instruction. In addition to that, we hope that this experience and using the Lincoln Learning Solutions content and the LMS is developing your technology skills and getting your classroom ready for the future. So, and speaking of the future, we are very pleased to announce that we will be partnering with the APSRC again for next year. So year 2 is under construction. We're ready to go. We're getting things really powered up for a special year next year as well. So that same type of content, that same type of access to the LMS, you will have that all at your fingertips next year as well. And so we really look forward to that partnership for year 2. As Casey mentioned, we are always looking for ways to improve. So there is a satisfaction survey that will be going out. This has some great pieces that in information that we all need. The APSRC is going to ask some questions about the support and how well you felt supported this year. And then we also have some questions because we want to get your feedback on our content and on our LMS. So really take some time to complete that survey. There is going to be a link that will be shared with everybody in multiple ways. I think we have it on our takeaway, and we also have it here in the chat as well. We are asking that you take some time to thoughtfully complete that survey. You'll have until the end of February to complete it. So we look forward to hearing your responses. But above all, I do just want to say that it has been a privilege working with the APSRC and the school districts in Arkansas. We have learned so much from you, and we appreciate all the work that you are doing in your classrooms. So great work, everybody, and I'm looking forward to a great session. Casey, off to you.
Thank you. So just a couple housekeeping things. I did put the takeaway document in there. So if you're anything like me, you may even want to just know it's in there and kind of follow along some of those components. So we want to make sure that link is available. And then also the survey link we put in there, but you can also get to it in that takeaway document, as you can see here. And if you're following along the chat, I think Melody had mentioned a couple things in there as well. So check out that chat and remember to ask your question. So let's dive into this. What can we expect? What are those defaults that we can expect within our Lincoln Learning Solutions, our empowered courses? Let's talk about those. So picture this scenario. In preparation for customizing your course, it's important to understand some of those basic default settings. This will make the adjustments to those settings a little bit easier for you. The first one we want to look at is the school domain. It's typically set up with courses that are ranged and or also known as traditional. So ranged and traditional means if I go into my Mathematics 1 course here, I'm going to go ahead and click into that course. I actually want to click to the editor, so a little navigation for you. If I go to the scheduler here, this course is set up as that range and traditional. I see here that I can set those due dates. So that's what range and traditional really looks at. Nothing is due for the student until I make it due, and I can drag and drop those items. I can click on specific dates. I can make those adjustments. So that's one of the big things. By default, though, our courses are also continuous. So the domain is typically to be set up as ranged, but there are a couple that are set up as continuous, meaning that maybe the domain or the teacher has determined that I want the system to apply those soft due dates to student enrollments based on the start and end date and number of activities. So only the activities identified to be graded will be found in that to-do list. So a little bit of difference here. I'm just going to switch to a different course. And we'll see here in a continuous course, my scheduler is actually blank and it kind of identifies that course. So that's one really quick way when I jump in to know which way my courses are. So I'm demonstrating currently as a teacher. So from that teacher level view, if you're an admin, to see this type of view, you could proxy as a teacher, or you could go into the components of the course on the left-hand side. So you would search your course and then you'll see these components of whatever that course is. So you could jump in as an editor to people, but we are focusing on that teacher role today. Let me see. So something important to identify when we look at the ranged and continuous updates to blackout dates, we've seen those kind of occur. If there's that change and you do have that range in traditional course, very much a manual switch. If it's a continuous course, it's automatically adjusted. That day is just not calculated into that to-do list. Let me jump into another course. So sorry about the navigation. I hope I'm not making anybody nauseous watching me kind of juggle through these different courses. But I'm going to go ahead and click on Mathematics 1 again. I'm going to go back to the editor. Assessments. So these are the only activities designed by Lincoln Learning Solutions to be associated to scoring. So we'll talk about some of those other options, but by default, that's important to know. These are the only ones that are associated to course completion because they're only things that are associated to the gradebook. So you can reference, there's a great job aid in there for specifics on those assessment defaults in the creating assessment job aid. But if you do look here, I'm going to jump down into a mastery assessment, for example. That is a nice default to kind of keep in mind. We do have those mastery assessments throughout each topic, looking at that summative piece. So mastery assessments are summative online assessments. And again, the first time you go in there, explore those defaults. So I just did a quick edit. I can see here, this is the default on the activity. There's also settings that I can apply and I can adjust to meet my students' experience. So I always like to point out the assessment review is a nice place as well. It'll kind of look at different ways that the student is going to experience the results. So we see a lot of teachers customizing in that area. And then also things like this advanced assessment options. But when the first time you go into that mastery assessment, you're going to see those typical defaults. And again, it's also called out pretty well in that resource found in the takeaway. So Buzz Editor, creating assessment job aid. With a lot of things to cover, I want to make sure I'm pausing at the right time. Lindsay, I was trying to keep an eye on the chat. Is there anything else that has come in or any questions I can address?
Oh, that pesky mute button. No, all of the questions have been addressed at this point. Somebody did ask if this was an administrator view, and it is actually the teacher view. So Casey is navigating from the teacher's view of things. But aside from that, everything has been taken care of at this point.
Thank you. So let's keep looking at our defaults. Let's talk about activities. So when we look at our course, we're going to see here in each of these topics, we're going to have lessons. And in each of those lessons, we have these topics. Activities such as read it, watch it, show it answer keys, practice it. These are all set to time completion. So I'm just going to go ahead and edit this read it. We're going to kind of stick in this example. And if I go to the settings and I come down here to advanced options, we see here that the mark as complete when student views this activities for a specified time. This is the default setting, so it's going to be 1 minute. If there are components like a show it answer key that's quick and easy, you can adjust this to be mark activity complete. The student just hits a button. That's kind of the big difference here. We're also going to hear Kathy talk a little bit about some of these upcoming changes, upcoming opportunities for the next school year. And we'll find that something called an auto-graded course actually has this as the completion component. We have nice resources to come out with those components as well. So these, again, these learning objects are not tied to course completion, the read it's, the watch it's, only the assess it's by design are. We also want to mention that grading periods are not course settings designated by Lincoln Learning Solutions. So I'm going to come back to the read it here in a second. But keep in mind when I go to the course settings and I look at grading periods, these are not designed. So these are ones that I've created myself in this particular course. If I switch back to a different course, let's go to German 1. Let's go to the editor of that course. And we're going to see here grading periods are turned off. So by default, Lincoln Learning Solutions Empowered does not turn on grading periods either at the domain or the course level. We have noticed that it is typical that you may see the grading periods at the domain level. So just something to kind of point out and work through either as a district or with that. I do want to pause and check in with Gina and Melanie just to make sure if there's anything you wanted to add about the grading periods. I know there's different setups with different districts and different schools. So I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add to that.
Next year, we plan to pull the grading periods directly from eSchool. Maybe we'll, at the start of our school year and how we maintenance marking periods will be a little more uniform at the start of school next year. So that will actually push into the course. It's my understanding, and define your grading periods based upon how they're established at the school level in your districts.
Thank you. That's good information. All right, let's keep moving on. I did see a question come in about bulk edit. So to adjust the, so if I wanted to take something like, let's say an answer key, and I wanted the AK, I'm just going to click a couple of these here. I'm just doing a quick search in the activity list. And we go to that bulk edit. You're going to see that the only bulk edit you can make to a general activity is going to be the visibility to and the location. So unfortunately, that's not a bulk that we can change, making that change to those items. There are other things. It's all based on the activity type you choose. These are all the same thing. They're all an activity that's file or web-based. When I look at assessments, we'll see things that we can make different adjustments to. So unfortunately, that is not a bulk edit option, but a great question nonetheless. I see another question come in, and And I will circle back around to that. Let's keep working on some of the customizations to consider. So Lindsay, if you want to check that one out a little bit, and we'll come back to that additional question that was just asked.
Sure.
So a few customization things to keep in mind when we're talking about defaults. Lincoln Learning Solutions is created with those bite-sized pieces of learning, those learning objects, also known as our ITs. Because of that, it's designed to be customizable and flexible. Make the customizations. It makes it a breeze because they're bite-sized pieces. So for example, maybe I want to take this item here and I want to create an anticipatory set in this course. Maybe I want to move the watch it before the read it. That's a great way to customize this to meet my needs. The components are still talked about in the pacing guide. They're still within that same lesson. So it might be something that I kind of move around within that lesson. Another great example is show its. Maybe I want this show it to be a bite-sized piece of gradable activity. Couple things to keep in mind. One, I better hide that answer key if I'm going to make something gradable. And then I want to edit that show it. I'm going to go to settings. I'm going to make the item gradable. From here, I want to determine how are they going to submit. Is this just a simple submission of questions or confirmation? Maybe I just want them to add notes. Do I want them to upload and show me work? Then I want to make sure I have multiple documents. From there, I need to determine my entry. We'll often see points since most of the course is created that way, but you do have additional options to explore here. Remembering that weight and category is right now associated to points and I'm not scaling it. So if I wanted this worth just 10 points, I could simply change that top point here. And now I can just simply hit save. And this is now a submittable item for my students. So that's one really, really quick item, but it's important to hide that show at AK. Also take a look at your hidden items. You'll see here there's actually an assess it hidden. And in this case, if there is an assess it hidden, no need to even worry about that show it. Hide that show it, make that assess it visible. It'll save you some time in working with that answer key. So always check out what's available in that lesson because you might just be a simple switch off here and making that assessment an actual assessment versus the show it becoming assessment. Saves you a couple clicks. What about a read it? What about a try it? What about a practice it? What if you want to make those gradable? We can do that. So in this read it, I'm going to go ahead and do a quick edit here. And I'm actually going to take advantage of the add activity instructions. Maybe here I want to ask some reflection questions. And I want to say submit in comments your answers and this is worth X amount of points. You want to add those really nice instructions, be thorough, identify the expectation, and continue through that. Next, I want to go to settings. And again, just like that show it, I want to go ahead and make this option here. I want my students just to comment right to my question that I posed in the notes. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And this is only a couple questions or 8 questions. So I'm going to make this worth 5 points. So that's one quick way to adjust something that's more of an activity. Now, one thing I do want to caution and pull out, we did talk about these with a couple folks. Things like a practice it may not be as ideal. A practice it tends to have the answer key directly within there. So if you want to make a practice gradable, you may have to be a little bit more, what's the word? A little bit more creative, we'll use that word. You might want to be a little bit more creative. So you might want to ask a reflective question, not associated to the questions already being asked in the practice it. Or you may just decide things like practice its or watch its or show its, not show its, practice its, watch its, and play its are just those components the students don't have to be graded on. And we want to kind of look at those different items. So check out the item before you take that next step. You want to make sure that answer keys aren't built in. And if they are, that you're asking a different type of question, or maybe it's just simply, let me know that you did it. And I'm just going to give you a couple points. We see those sometimes happen too. It really depends on your content, your student, and your grade level. And we wanted to make sure in your takeaway, we did identify those learning object types. That'll help you understand the default and the design behind each of those. So please check out what is a learning object document, as well as the video for additional exploration. And don't forget, in the younger grade levels, we also have those teach its, which are videos that are there to enhance the read it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and pause and check in with those questions. Let me see, give me a moment to get.
Hey, Casey, this is Gina. I wonder if you might show them right here how they can preview the activity to see what it is.
Yes, I absolutely can. So if you are within this and I want to preview and see what this practice is, I mean, I could go through the long route of navigating to the activities and finding it, but that would just be silly. If I go to the More button on the right-hand side, so anytime you see those 3 dots stacked, it means More. And I'm going to simply hit Preview. And here I can preview and completely interact with that item. So this is a good example that practice it's kind of interactive. We might not want to make this gradable, or if we do, we might want to ask a reflective question. If I navigate back in the upper left-hand corner, it's going to take me back here directly to the editor itself. So it's not going to take me back to navigating through the course. So let me hit More one more time and I'll preview this, read it. And here's where you're going to see that instructions. It's going to be right here, right above the read it. So that's where that instruction is that we identified. I see quite a few questions coming in regarding Google Docs. So just give me 1 second to get caught up on the questions. You should see Pamela asked a question about Google Chrome and students not being able to download the worksheets and organizers because they are in Word. You should see there's a couple of things that you can do with Google Docs, not something that we prepared to kind of cover or walk through, as we were focusing a little bit more on the curriculum components and working through Buzz. But keep in mind that if the student's able to open or save the document to a Chromebook, it does save to the cloud, and you should be able to convert that in at Google Docs. And we'll also see most worksheets have a PDF option. So that's kind of something to consider. How to use Google Docs, that is, again, not something we typically cover in our tutorials. You will see in the student tutorials, let me navigate there super quick, that we do have a few student quick tips that do highlight Google Docs best practices and items. We found these useful for our teachers, and those are something that you can definitely look at. So again, I got there by going to the I for tutorials, clicking on student quick tips in the upper right-hand corner, and then I'm going to see here we have 2 Google items and also the Buzz assessment tips that link back to those. So that's definitely something that we can kind of dive into. Maybe Melody and Gina, if you want to gather more Google specific questions, that is something that we can work through on our weekly and see how that we can support those, but definitely, unfortunately, not something that we had identified prior. I'm happy to jump into it if we have more time towards the end, but using Google Docs and using those items we're looking into. And you'll hear some great feedback from Kathy here in a little bit regarding going into next year and some things that we have identified and our teams are heavily investigating and searching into. So those PDF things, we hear those loud and clear and that sort of item. But do keep in mind, it is sometimes with Google as easy as searching in your Google and looking at how to convert a Word document to a Google Docs when using a Chromebook. It might come up with some really useful items there as well. I know that Kathy and Lindsay were kind of exploring that question as well. Is there anything you ladies would like to add or any suggestions that you might recommend? I just wanted to check in. I saw in our conversations.
Yeah, great question, Casey, too. We did a very quick search, maybe for some support as well, and it looks like Melody had a document prepared as well. So I'll put kind of what we found in the chat, and but definitely something we can explore together with the APSRC.
Perfect. So we'll continue that exploration. Keep those questions coming, and we definitely mark that down on our end. We do plan to jump into the gradebook. I did see some questions coming in there. That's a little bit further down, but it's okay. We can transition there because we're talking about what kind of edits can we make to assessments. So let's check that component out next, and we'll try to weave in there some of that gradebook components. So I'm going to go ahead and go to we're going to stick in the editor for now. And I want to talk a little bit about assessments. So keep in mind that your assessments, there are more than one type. So assess it is anything that's gradable associated to Lincoln Empowered, Lincoln Learning. That being said, there is online assessments. You'll see those often in mastery assessments, and there's upload assessments. So those upload assessments, there's some limitations there on what changes you can make. The questions are there, you can adjust the points, you can make different rubrics, you can hide it and make the show it gradable instead. There's some things that you can do there. But as far as the online assessments, there are different settings that we can change. So let's say you have a student or group of students that needed to experience the assessment differently than the full class. So the first thing you want to do is you want to create that group. Then you want to edit the assessment. So if you're unfamiliar or you haven't used groups, I want to point you to the right resources. We're going to go to that I for tutorial again. And here we're going to see right from the teacher tools, there is a 2-part portion on creating groups. And it's just the creating of groups and how you can edit groups. So really watch those and dive into those. And you'll also see here in the tutorials, the job aids, there's also some step-by-step for groups as well. So we want to make sure that we create the groups. In short form, if I go up to the settings and I go to manage grouping, I'm going to add grouping. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create that. So maybe this is modifications. Target number of students per group. I'm going to go ahead and fix that at 0. And I'm going to mark that as none. So number of groups, I actually want 1. It's fixed number of groups, not students in groups. I'm going to go ahead and generate. Maybe these are just my modifications. I'd like to point out that group naming and subgroup here is very important because when I go in certain screens, I can see the primary group and the subgroup, but in a lot of cases, I can only see that subgroup. So make sure you're naming those appropriately and understand the difference. Then we want to go ahead and select our students that are in that group and we hit save. We always say when creating groups, remember things, write it down on a piece of paper. Why are you using it? What are you using it for? How do I want to create those different groups? And that will be very useful. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back here. And now I'm going to go ahead and locate that assessment. So I'm going to click on that assessment here and I'm going to edit it. So we wanted to make sure we were pointing out some of the settings to look into. So explore the options, customize accordingly. So the first thing I'm going to do is I only want this applied to my group. So this is the very first thing I want to do. I want to click and find that modification group. If I don't select that, whatever changes I make go directly to the full class or anybody not in the group. Okay. So if nothing's changed specific for a group, then the whole class is going to get those changes. If it's just for a specific group, then only that group is going to get that change. Next, we're going to look at the items to consider. So I want to point out a couple of settings here in settings. I know we're talking about a modification group, but there are some things that we have had and we've helped support, and I just want to make sure we're calling them out. If I look down here, I'm going to go ahead and expand each one of these tiles so that we can look at them briefly. 1, if I say that the student must complete that activity before continuing to the next, that just means the student simply needs to complete it before moving to the next item. If I look at advanced gradebook options above, however, you will see that sometimes teachers select the require a passing score for course credit. If you have this checked, and if the student does not complete that item with a passing score, it will remove their cumulative scores. So keep that in mind. We recommend considering that modification. And again, we are looking at Lincoln Empowered being used through the Buzz Learning Management System. So if you're doing everything in Buzz, just kind of keep that in mind. This is the system we're using. I saw a couple questions kind of coming in and the differences in Google Docs and the Buzz platform. So I just wanted to make sure that we specified this is using the curriculum through that system. We also want to look at the options here for formative assessments. So if you've ever gotten the situation where your student has actually gone through the course and then all of a sudden things started getting excused and you're like, I don't know what's happening. I didn't excuse that from the student. It could be that in here in the assessment settings, in the advanced assessment options, you may have this marked as a formative assessment. It's important to note when you do that and the student achieves passing score on objectives, it's going to excuse the student from anything else tied to those objectives. They're showing mastery, so it's excusing them. Lo and be true though, if I go up here and I look at those objectives and I see that tie-in, if that's also tied in later in the class or previously in the class, that will still get that excused option on there. So sometimes we have teachers kind of go back through and try to figure out where it's at. Just keep in mind, it could be at any level. So if I put that here and the student does well on that standard here, but that standard has been in other places in the course, it's going to excuse from those items as well. Does that make sense? I had Gina shake her head, so I feel like that's a good sign. Wonderful. I'm going to keep going through this and then pause in for those questions. So Lindsay, I'm going to check back in with you here in a minute. So I just wanted to give you that heads up. Polling questions. So I'm going to turn my formative assessment off because I don't want it to be formative assessments. But we talked about standards. We talked about points, and I may be making an adjustment for modification. I want to really look at the pool settings. So for example, I'm going to see here that this assessment is pulling 25 questions. This is really important, and this can trip us up because there's also a thing called scaling. So I want to slow this down and make sure we're talking about this in depth. I'm asking 25 questions. 12 points of those questions are coming from 1 point Lincoln Learning Solutions multiple choice questions. It's also coming from 2 4-point Lincoln Learning Solutions essays and 11 2-point Lincoln Learning Solutions multiple choice. So notice how there's 2 types of multiple choice. 12 of them are worth 1 point and 11 of them are worth 2 points. This 25 questions, so if I add up 12, 2, and 11, I'm hoping I'm getting to 25. And then if I multiply those types by those points, if I scroll to the top, that's where I'm getting the 42 points. Okay, so if my student needs a change, such as I'm not going to ask the essays, okay, we're going to take that. That's 8 points worth of assessments, questions, 8 points, 2 4-point essays. I can take this and I can change this to 0. Done. Now, the assessment's supposed to be pulling 25, which is going to be 12 and 11 of these. So I can change this to 23 and leave that alone. And then I can subtract the 8 points from the top up here if I want. And this is where it kind of now comes down to preference. Or do I go in and do I see if I can maybe make up those 8 points in my questions? So let's flip over to questions. And I can see if I have enough questions to ask the other types, right? So maybe I do, maybe I don't. You may see in some situations there's 160 questions and I'm only asking 25. I might have enough variety. So I kind of want to click through and check those points. So here's a 1 point. Here's another 1 point. Do I have enough 2 points to ask the questions? If I decide to ask more 2-point questions, but there's not actually more of them available and there's not 4 more, there's a chance I'm going to ask the same question twice. Does that make sense? Because it's pulling from what's available. So you really want to dive in and look at that and make that determination. It's sometimes preference, so we can't tell you which one's better, but that's how the mechanics of the course is working. Now, let's say you're like, that's a lot. I just have this situation. I need to kind of fill it out now. It may be that you just simply leave it at 23. It's going to still scale out of 42 if I don't change those points. So that means that this assessment, 22 and 12, you guys can do the math. I can't, algebra teacher, just not in practice right now. But you're going to see it's going to scale. So whatever the student earns, if it's a B, it's still going to reflect a B out of 42 points versus a V out of whatever the other points are. And you'll see that scaling. So it's really something important to remember when I'm making those modifications. Do I want the points to match? Do I want I'm going to make up those points, or am I simply just going to let it scale? I'm going to pause there. Melody and Gina, I know I just threw something at you, so I just wanted to check in with you guys. You're kind of like my checkpoint. Does that help clarify some of those changes we can make in assessments? Good, good, good. And again, in your takeaway, you're going to see on page 3, if you're following along, we do point that out. So not only do we talk about these points and kind of what the breakdown is of each type and the point value, but also an example of points and how they work and how that scaling might come in effect. So we did try to break that down for everybody as well. All right, so those are just some things to consider for your assessments in general, and I'm going to go ahead and hit save to apply it to this group. Lindsay, I want to check in with you. I see quite a few questions and responses that have come in. So can we kind of step back and see what questions they are and how we can help?
Yeah, so we've had a few questions still talking about how to use Word docs or ways that they can possibly write on PDFs through the system. And somebody had mentioned Cami, which we know we've had other clients who have used PDF writers. So that is an alternative if you are not able to pull in those Word docs. It does give you an alternative and the ability to write on those PDFs instead. And then we did have a question regarding Casey, and I know we have a little bit of an agenda that we're following. So if we have time and we're able to just kind of go to the gradebook towards the end of this session and show people how you can look at the gradebook and just see what assignments are missing for a student. There was some questions regarding how to add some resources into the Lincoln Learning content. So Melody and I are chatting, and I know that Melody and Gina have some really great resources that they have shared with people. So we're going to see what we need to do to get some of those resources out to this group and make sure that they have what they need so that they're able to go in and add items to the Lincoln Learning content if they have their own things they want to add. Melody, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, and Gina has demonstrated in training as well as in a lot of our weekly collaboratives how they can add individual learning objects to support and customize the curriculum. And then I have shared out in our POC updates, it's a public facing document with over 350 school people. There is a section in there with a table where we have actually done some recordings that would support you understanding a little bit more about how you could incorporate Google Drive and actually use that to customize your curriculum a little bit. So that I have shared out here with a link to that public facing document. And then, yeah, we have shared a couple of apps, but guys, if you don't buy them, they're going to have limitations. They're free, but anything with free comes with a limitation. So if your kids are having to make multiple edits to information on a PDF, it's probably only going to allow them like up to 3 a day if you use the free version. Or you could actually secure an app and license for your kids where they could make the changes unlimited to those as well. Someone posted Cami. I've heard that as well.
Thank you. I think that's all great information and a lot of information we're throwing at everybody. So continue to check that chat. Lindsay, I think we've covered most things then in that component. And like we said, if we do need to add to the takeaway or create specifics about adding content, we might even have a video or two out there that we've created in the past that we can share with this team. So Melody and Gina will definitely look for those additional resources in our Monday meeting. So I think this is a great time since we asked about it to talk about the grade books. We were going to kind of dive into where you can find how you can use Assess-It analytics, but let's touch into some of those standards here. So this is a crazy grade book that we have going on here. I do want to point out the display options. Now, we have been into a lot of grade books here. We've kind of dived in and we've customized them. So I'm actually going to navigate away from this crazy looking one. I'm going to jump into Music K. This should show me a pretty default display settings. I don't think we've really used this course heavily in our training environment. So I'm going to go ahead and hit display options. You're going to see here that this is display visible columns. So that's everything to the name. It's to the right, but before the first assessment. So it's kind of those initial columns that you see in the gradebook. There's also footers. So by default, there typically aren't footers on. We're going to see this how the student sees it, and we're going to talk about changing some of these here in a minute. And we're going to see here, we just see the row header and the feedback indicators. So that being said, when you're looking at the visible column, and I believe this is farther down in that resource, we talk a little bit about some of the considerations in the gradebook. So we are skipping around a little bit. It seems pretty natural for the audience. Some things you want to consider. You want to look at, do you want to see the total minutes that your students have been in the course? You can do that. Do you want to know if a student's grade has been reported or their current enrollment status? Turn those on. Just keep in mind the more columns I add in, so I'm going to add in overall gradable completion and overall completion. So gradable is just what percentage are they through the pieces that are adding towards completion. Overall is how far are they through all of the components in the course. Read it, show it, watch it, all of those items. I'm actually going to go ahead. I really like to include the grading scale. And if you have grading periods, sometimes that's also useful to see that in here if your view is not filtered. I'm going to add minutes spent and points associated. So I'm changing my score display. And I think Gina even pointed this out. This is really nice to see minutes spent on not only the assessments, but if I turn on the show now non-graded activities, I can kind of turn those on and off as needed. So this is going to make my gradebook go really, really, really large. But I can turn this non-gradable activities on and off. It's just a really nice way to kind of display those features. And then I can hit save. And again, this is a little bit more simplistic gradebook because my students haven't been actively working in here, but you can see that level of detail that we've just added. We added these additional pieces. Also keep in mind when I add these, I can pin these items if I want to. That's sometimes nice to pin it so that whenever I'm scrolling, it's always there. I unpinned it, so that didn't work. I want the pin. There we go. And it's not pinning for me because I don't know why. Maybe because I don't have content in there for it to pin. But you'll kind of see those options. So we got there by going to display options in the upper right-hand corner and customizing it. This is your view. So customize away. You can take things on and add them and subtract them. Just remember, if you're looking for that finalized score, and if we go back to that example we talked about earlier, and you have the required a passing score for course credit, and you can't find someone's score, it could be that setting is on something. So just that quick reminder. Now let's go to our crazy gradebook. And we can see how this more impactful gradebook, if we go to those display settings, and maybe we put some of that information in here. So I'm changing that display score. I'm going to show those non-gradable activities. And I left some other items on here. I don't need the start and end date. I just want my status. I want to know if those students are reported. So you'll see here, I added quite a few initial columns. If I go that far left, so those are all kind of be there first. Come on, let me pin it. Nope, it's not letting me today. As I scroll through, you're going to see all that data, but I can see minutes. I can see if they got that, completion item on there. I can scroll through. Now, keep in mind, you also have this activity find. So let's look at our mastery assessment one. So I went to the upper right-hand corner and that find activity. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. So same icon we see in the editor, find activity. It's going to bring me right to that item, and I can see the time spent per student. I can see the score. Those are in the colored columns. We can see here that Calvin has spent 73 minutes on this activity, but I haven't had a submission yet. So he's still working. This is the only way I've ever seen that you can kind of see if a kid maybe is possibly in progress, unless they just kind of hung out there and didn't really click the start button, but it does give you a little bit more insight on if they've had some time spent. Let's click on the assessment itself. So up here in the top corner, we're going to look at those test analytics. And you will see, as I said, around page, towards the end of page 4, we talk about these analytics. So I clicked on, I clicked on the title. We see the assessment titles in blue. We can see how my students are doing, if they've submitted, if we've given them feedback. But then we see the analytics component. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. This gives us some strong information. As I scroll down here, I can see the questions, and I start to see descriptors associated to those questions and how students are responding to them. So we can kind of expand that to see the actual question. We'll see that it does identify which one is supposed to be the right one and the percentage of how students are doing. This lets me understand how my students are understanding the components of the course. This is a great way to start evaluating. Do I want to add my own components? Do I want to adjust things? Do I want to make different things gradable? And you can really take a look at that. Now, hovering over each one of these, you'll see these different icons. The negative sign indicating that students who did well on the rest of the assessment answered this item incorrectly more often than students who did poorly on the rest of the assessments. So you'll see as you hover over top of them, they're going to explain to you what this means. This is just a generally difficult question. Students are answering this item incorrectly majority of the time. So you can look for those items. When I scroll to question 8, I see a nice little bit maybe closer to that bell curve we're hoping for in these types of questions. So you again can see each one of those. You'll see in that takeaway, we also linked to the Agilix resource for test analytics that you can dive into. But we talked about standards. We talked about how those items are associated to standards. So you can kind of see the distribution based on that. And then I can also look at the distribution based on the student and those components. So again, if that student's getting an A on that standard, that's another place to see if I had that formative assessment turned on, that student is probably excused from that particular learning objective in other places. So we can kind of see those triggers and evaluate them. Melody, Gina, was there anything that you wanted to dive us? I know we talked about this in length, but I just wanted to check in with you to see if we covered some of those analytics or if you had any additional examples on those scenarios of, you know, I want to know if my students are struggling on a specific standard and how can I use that to help me?
Yes, I think you did a great job. Unless anyone has questions in the chat, I just wanted I wanted Casey to be able to show you some greater power in using this system, and maybe you haven't explored that. So as a teacher, the way you used to analyze and determine whether or not you have gaps in your instruction, this is a really good way to look at the data from the actual questions and performance on them from your specific class.
Thank you. Thank you. That's great insight. And remember, you're looking at these analytics to help you support your students. So keeping in mind things like my students are really struggling on this particular standard, I can always grab that standard just to take a step further. You know, I can grab that standard and I can always use that digital library lookup to find additional resources to give to them in places like the clipboard, or maybe just my whole class. If the majority of my students are failing that item and it's a certain question type, we can look for those additional pieces. And you can check out our, again, our tutorials. Let me return to them. You're going to see that we have new digital library resources that were fresh off the presses in the last month. Check those out. They'll give you a little bit more insight in how we can use that to find content, to dig into our content courses, and how to just generally search. Lindsay, I see long questions coming in at this point. I want to check in on you. What questions do we have?
Sorry, I always lose the mute button in Zoom, so I apologize. It takes me a second. So one of the questions that we just had come in is there a quick and easy way to access an answer key from the gradebook? So we do have a job aid that will help to explain this. It's not a super quick and easy way, but there is a way that you can get directly to those answer keys to help you work through the process of grading those items.
Talking on mute. The only way is if you click on the item and you go to those tools and you go to the editor. So you're kind of like backtracking, if that makes sense. And I'm going to the editor. It should bring me up that item, but that's not going to get you where you need. That answer, if this is an online assessment, you might be able to go to the questions and dive into those correct answers. But if I'm looking for something like an assess it that's an upload, I then kind of have to navigate back through. So as Lindsay said, if you're looking for those answer keys, yep.
Casey, if you click on a student's name in the gradebook,
yep,
and then you click on one of the activities. So if you choose any of them, yep, it'll take you to the grading area, and then you can click on the name of the activity. It's still a little bit of navigation, but at least it gets us there fairly quickly. And then from here, we just have to do some navigation adjustments. We would have to change that view as to view as myself, the teacher, instead of the student. And then that will provide us the ability to then navigate to that answer key. This was an online assessment, so it's a little bit different, but it'll at least give us the option to then go back to that show an answer key or ahead to the assess answer key.
That's a great tip, Lindsay. So I think it kind of depends on where you're grading from, right? So if I'm in the gradebook doing some grading, that's kind of going to be walking through different level of navigation. And just a reminder, if you're in the needs grading, it works the exact same way. You're going to click on that item, then click that assess it, and then do that navigation back. So this is one that has a separate answer key. I want to make sure I'm viewing as myself, as Lindsay has already walked us through. And then here at the bottom, when I navigate, oh, I got a little cranky on me. I can navigate back to that show at AK, remembering 6th grade and higher, it's going to be a show at AK. And in the elementary level, you might even see an assess at AK that I can navigate to get that answer key. So same similar experience. The big difference is in the gradebook, you have to click on the student and then their activity to see that information. Great call out, Lindsay. Thank you so much. Okay, I did promise I wanted to make sure we had time for Q&A. It looks like they're kind of coming in though. So Gina, I just want to check in on you and see if you would like us to continue through those topics, or if you would like for us to just pause here and take generalized questions.
I think I was kind of watching that. I think the questions are kind of being addressed.
Perfect.
So I think you can just keep going through your topics unless somebody else sees something in here that hasn't been addressed. I think just continue going through your topics.
Okay, I'm going to jump a little bit to the topics. If you don't mind, Kathy, I want to make sure we don't run out of time for what's kind of going into next year. I think we did have some of those PDF questions and some of those things. So let's kind of jump ahead to item number 6, and then we'll go back to number 4, where it's talking about how to support those students mid-year and those sort of items. I just want to make sure we don't run out of time on that.
Of course.
So let me go ahead and mute. And if you want to talk through.
Sure. So I am very excited, as mentioned before, that we are partnering again with the APSRC for year 2. And Melody put something in the chat that is very valuable. So all of the hard work that you guys did this year in preparing your classes and getting them up and running will be preserved for next year in year 2. So that is a big deal. And we're very, very excited about that. So year 2 is looking really great. We have some new features. We have some new types of courses. We have fully auto-graded courses. So we're excited to announce this new offering. These are all auto-graded courses that students will not need to submit uploaded documents to their teacher. So essentially, the students can go through the course, complete all of the items without having to kind of upload something and send it to the teacher. So everything will be graded within the system. This might be an option for anybody who is planning on doing remote learning again for the next year, but this is another course offering. There is a special course list that goes with that. And so as you'll see that not all of our courses will be offered in that way. The other thing, we were committed to enhancing and making our videos a lot more interactive and engaging. So we have undergone a large effort to replace all of those under construction videos. So students will not see any videos that are under construction for the next year. Students will encounter a mix of Lincoln Learning Solutions videos and also some of our third-party vendor videos. So you'll be able to see that very nicely in our courses as well. It was a big effort from our curriculum team, and we are pleased with the results. In addition, we are working to make our pacing guide. So if you haven't utilized your pacing guide yet, those are always in that course resources folder at the beginning of your course. The pacing guides are going to be more accessible for teachers and administrators. So we received some feedback on those. And one thing that you're going to see is that in our 2nd grade courses, and I believe our 8th grade courses, you will see there are 2 options right now for our pacing guide. You'll have the option to have the PDF, which is what we've always had, or an Excel version of the pacing guide. This is going to be helpful if you need to kind of manipulate the document or search for standards, export some items. You will have the option in the 2nd grade classes and the 8th grade classes to utilize the Excel version or the PDF version. In addition, we want your feedback. We want to know how we can make these pacing guides a little bit more accessible for you and your district. So there is a survey at the bottom of the pacing guide that we encourage you to take so that we can make sure that we're getting all of the information that you need.
Hey, Kathy, I had a little trouble getting that to load initially.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to point out again in 2nd and 8th grade courses, core courses, we're going to see that Excel download, which is going to redirect. I just want to make sure we had that visual. And that'll allow us to kind of use it just as an Excel, or again, that PDF download. You'll see even when we download the Excel, I'm just kind of going from there. And then we're going to see that feedback is below. So that pacing guide survey, again, is associated to those grade levels. If you have any other questions, please let us know. I'm going to go ahead and go back on mute.
No, that was great. And it is, that your feedback is very valuable to us. And again, another new and exciting thing that you can look forward to for the upcoming school year is we are working on a new website that's set to be ready by this April. So some of the highlights for this website are really going to be a new support center. This is going to be dynamic and robust so that, you have a place to go if you have any questions. The training documents that you probably have utilized and that we've shared with the APSRC, they'll all be located in one easy to access spot. We're going to have a bigger frequently asked questions section, so that will continually add and update to a fully searchable help center that utilizes our knowledge-based articles, and so that you can really have the information that you need. And most importantly, we are going to have a live chat feature, so that can really support that on-demand type of support that you might need. So that will be available. And we hope to have that ready by this April, but you can definitely look forward to it for the next school year. And finally, as we grow and as we learn from our clients and learn from our partners, we are really taking that client feedback to heart. So one of the things that we are including on our roadmap of enhancements is we have heard the feedback about those PDFs, and we know that you are looking for something a little bit more dynamic and something that a little bit more interactive for your students to complete. So we are looking on ways to enhance those PDFs, hopefully make them more a little interactive so that you can kind of complete them right within the system. So look forward to more updates on that as we kind of make those enhancements on our PDFs. As stated earlier today, it has been such a pleasure working with the districts of Arkansas, and your thoughtful feedback has really helped us, up our game and get things ready for the next school year. So we're looking for a successful partnership in year 2. Back to you, Casey.
So Casey, I do see we have a couple of questions in the chat. I just wanted to go ahead and bring them up to you. One of them was, how can we see the student view? There are several screens that state I have to be enrolled as a student to see it. So could we show how we can show that student view for from our view as a teacher?
Yep, and I'm talking on mute. Yep, you absolutely can. So there's a couple parallel views with students and teachers. So their home is going to look a little similar to this, more of that grid view. If I go ahead and click on a course, I'm going to go ahead and click on the Activities of English Language Arts 2, Semester 1. And in this version here, if I go in the upper right-hand corner, nope, not yet. Let's try that again. This is going to be the general similar view that a student is going to see in your course. So you have a landing page, they'll see that, they'll be able to search their content. Here, they're going to have kind of a to-do list or an upcoming last visited and up next items as well. So if I click on a particular item, which is what I was trying to do, then it gives me the option in the upper right-hand corner to change the view as. So there's a couple features here. I can do the teacher, a group of students, or the student themselves. So if we search for that student, then I can kind of experience as Calvin. So if he had completed this, I would see a green check mark here. If he submitted an assessment, I would see how many out of how many, and diving into the results to see more information. So it's kind of that generalized view of the content. So keep in mind that students have two primary areas per course. They have activities and gradebook. So if I navigate to my gradebook for the course and I go to Calvin, I'm going to see I now experience this version just like the student with some minor updates. So the students will have the same grades tab. We see those same analytics. They have a dashboard. Their For Me area will match yours if you've given the student anything in their For Me. Their What If, the activity, they too see this tab, and this lets me know where the student has been and for how long. Their Objective Mastery tab is there if they've received badges. And then the Stream and To-Do list. So the student, remember I told you on the homepage, they have a Stream and To-Do list tab. So they're slightly different. They don't have a teacher dashboard tab. They have these two tabs. If I go into the grades area for a particular student in that individual gradebook, I will see Calvin's activity stream, and I will see his to-do list on the items he has late or upcoming. So it's a very easy way to kind of see similar paralleled views to students without logging in as that student. Lindsay, did I forget anything there?
No, thank you very much. That was great. I was just looking through the chat to see, we did have a question come in regarding lessons that are scheduled for a class within Buzz in the editor are not showing up for students. So my first question was, is the eyeball marked? And that was that the eyeball is not marked on that. So it's not hidden. So that is something that we'll have to look into a little bit further. It's we would have to kind of do some exploring to see why those are hidden. But Casey, can you think of any other reasons that they might not be showing?
Yep. If you have something marked as that formative, so if you happen to have an assessment marked as formative and it's not showing up for the student, they could be excused from it, meaning it's not showing up for them. So a student can go to their settings. I'm not in as a student, but in their settings, they have the ability to view excused activities. So if they go in and they click on that and that item's there but has an X on it, then they've been excused. And the only way they can get excused is if you physically excuse them. And if it's activity level, more than likely it's due to that formative assessment trigger that we talked about a little bit earlier. So you have to do kind of some backtracking and figure out if you selected that or adjusted that. That's the only way that I'm really aware, or if that student's in a group. So if you've made that student in a group and you've adjusted that visibility for that group of students, then that student is not going to see that item. Gina, I know that we have, and Melody, we have walked through these scenarios a couple times now. What did I forget?
So a couple of things that we check when students aren't seeing something that the teacher can see is go back and check the master course, because the visibility is set at the highest folder first. So is the highest folder hidden and maybe the activities are visible, and then maybe the lesson folder might be hidden and the activities are visible. So we have to start tracking down from the highest folder first for visibility. And we check the parent and the derivative courses to make sure that, that they're operating the same, and one's not telling them to hide it and one's telling them to view it.
And Cindy, we can work with you individually. It may be a unique thing that Gina or I, either one, this afternoon, once we finish this, we can actually work with you to figure out a solution for your issue. And then girls at Lincoln, Debbie noticed in the great document you shared, there's a link that's not functioning. The one from Bologna, Debbie Knowles, and I did double click it, and it's not a functioning link right now.
We'll fix it. Yeah, and then the link that we sent you to the PDF, I'll re-render that link. So you don't have to download it. You can just, if you save that link and give us, till this afternoon, have to make sure that our system re-renders, then that should work. So that live PDF link will be the one that's updated. If you give us by the end of the day, you should be able to get to that link. I'm not sure why it didn't render back over when I converted it to a PDF. So I'll look into that. Good call out. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about how we can help those students that join mid-year, unless there's any other questions, Lindsay, that we should pivot and address before I do that.
No, I don't see any other questions. I'm just looking real quickly through the questions. There was one regarding audio availability during assessments. So they do have special needs students that have accommodations, and they just want to know if there's availability for audio in those particular lessons.
There wouldn't be in an online assessment. We have seen some teachers go in and kind of make their own audio recording. So that's an option. And two, sometimes if depending, there are, again, plugins and add-ons to a computer that you can do to have them read on a screen, but those would be independent of what we set up or what we utilize. And it looks like there was a question about saving the folders this year to be saved for next year. Melody, do you want to touch in on that a little bit more and kind of talk through that a little bit more?
Yes, I think people that are joining don't see the chat box items from earlier, so I'll paste them so y'all can keep working. I just don't think they're able to see the earlier chats that we posted at 9. So,
okay, perfect. And then also keep in mind, if you're asking about I saw someone come in about modifying and adapting assessments in Buzz. We did cover that a little bit earlier in the session as well, and it is in that takeaway document that will be followed up. And it'll be recorded as well. So I think that keeping in mind the big thing with assessments is creating that group and then making those adjustments and watching that recording. Unless there's anything else you would like to add to that, Melody or Gina. Okay, let's talk about these mid-year students. So picture this: students are entering a course mid-year or mid-semester. You want to ensure that they are caught up with the other students, but not completing work that they may have already completed. What do you do? So you can take care of these a couple different ways. One, we can use groups to adjust the content. So again, I'm going to go into my biology course. I'm going to go ahead and click on the editor. I'm going to quickly make my group of students. So I'm going to go to my manage groups in the upper right-hand corner. I'm going to add my groups. These are my mid-year students. I'm going to do one whole group. And I want to do none because I'm going to select those students. And maybe it is Para and Madison and Kaden. These are my students that are kind of coming in this particular course. So this is specific to this course. When using this approach, it's this course. I'm going to go ahead and just leave it as mid-year 1. I'm going to hit save. Now I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to go to the group settings tab. Within this, I can now maybe adjust some visibility. So maybe I don't want them to worry about certain components, or maybe I want to adjust that visibility of things like certain assessments or items like that. So you kind of have to dig into what you want the student to expect. In a continuous course, it is important to hide content based on that scenario. So if not, the to-do list is going to reflect the appropriate amount of course content and distributing it among the smaller amount of days. So in the example of I have 180 lessons and I leave it all available for those students and only take away the assessments, all of that content that I make available is going to be distributed among the, let's say, 90 days, even though it's 180 worth of lessons. So you actually do want to hide in that case. If it is a continuous class, you want to make sure, I'm going to go back to the whole course view. You want to make sure you're really hiding at that topic level until you get to where those assessments are, or where the content folder level is maybe a little bit closer to 90, and then look at some of those particular components. You want that time, you want those number of items to reflect the number of days as close as you can, so that the to-do list is reflecting appropriately. In a ranged course, that's different. The due dates are projected by you, the teacher. So that means I can use that group I just made and alternate. Maybe I'm taking those due dates maybe a day off or a day ahead for that group of students until they can get caught up. I can hide and adjust the content accordingly, but nothing's calculating into those due dates because you're able to specify those with a ranged course or traditional course. So if you don't want to hide the content, you can excuse a student maybe from a couple of the gradable items, and you can do that fairly quickly actually in the gradebook. So I'm going to go hop to the gradebook. So those group settings, again, those are for kind of that overarching, I can hide content, use the eyeball pretty quickly. You'll see here, in this case, these students have these little dots here. That's because I've hidden that content from them, so they're not expected to do it. But let's say I don't want to necessarily hide lesson 40. I'm going to click this little enable quick edit here, and I'm going to type in the area, and I'm just going to click an X, as opposed to that hiding of the eyeball. So the student's now excused from the assessment. At this level, we can really excuse assessments or hide both. So I can either hide activity or hide assessment, or I can excuse the assessment. Just keeping in mind how continuous is going to be impacted with the number of things that are visible. So another thing to keep in mind is group resources. So we do want to make sure that when it comes to those mid-year kiddos, that you're using those group resources. They're all listed there in the takeaway. I also want to point out, if you have maybe several students and I want to help them across my courses, this kind of goes into item number 5. How can people help me to work across my courses? How can I really help that volume of students? Maybe I have a student in algebra and a student in pre-algebra and 2 students in calculus. Maybe I'm teaching those types of courses. How do I help them all if they've all come in mid-year? Well, what we can do is we have a group of students who have joined more than one of your courses mid-year, and you want to be able to monitor those students as a group across the courses, or maybe even communicate with them. Let's start by going to the people area. Now, you're going to see here, I went to the people area at the main menu option. This is going to show me all students across all courses. If I go to a particular course, such as that mathematics course, and click the people, I'm only going to see the students in that course. So it's important that you're clicking the main menu people area. Here, I have this sorted in a couple different ways. So check out your display options. Decide if you want to group by course or if you just want to be able to freely sort. I'm not going to group by course because I want to find my particular students in particular courses. I can do that by clicking filter. We're going to come back to this filter. I just want to show you how you can quickly find a couple kids. So let's say that Ellie is new to my English Language Arts 2 course, and Madison is new to my Algebra 1 course. And notice how I'm just clicking those students' names. And let's say Farah is new to my English Language Arts 6 courses. I'm going to hit the plus sign here. I'm going to go ahead and take out that filter. And apparently that I should have done that each time. That's my fault. So if I find Ellie again, I'm going to go ahead and find her in her semester 2 course. I'm going to hit the add and I'm checking her name. And I'm doing that so that it adds to my clipboard in the upper right-hand corner. This clipboard feature allows you to group students. So you're going to see here, I have one too many students kind of clipped. I can just uncheck those students. But these are my unique mid-year students across all of my courses. Ellie's across maybe more than one, but I want to see that. I want those separate if I need them. So you can add and drop. You can remove the selected students altogether. You can search for the students here. So let's say I forgot one. Jerome from another course is also there. I can add him instantly. So really check out the clipboard resources on how you can use this. But what I'm doing here is these are my students across that mid-year point. I'm going to go ahead and expand quick lists and hit save. I want to do this because these are my mid-year students for AP. I'm just doing it that way because I already have one created and I didn't want to forget. So I can go ahead and click save. And you're going to see here I have quite a few different quick lists already. Maybe I do the same thing for struggling students across my courses or struggling students in a particular course. You can quick list these students together. This is a little bit different than groups. Groups is designed per course. You can see all the groups I have here. I can expand those groups and check to see which students are in them. So this is a really great view to see your groups across all of your courses. But I'm really looking for the students in the quick list. Those students And you'll see here to pull in a quick list, you just go to that item and hit the up arrow, and it now pushes those students up, those struggling students for that example. So it's really able to do those. I can now just take these students and do things like maybe I need to message those students, or I need to give them an activity because they're struggling. You can really use groups within the clipboard to push out that supplemental and supportive learning. But I promised you we were looking at people. I'm going to travel back to people. I'm going to go ahead and put my filter back on. And I want to show you a couple things here. One, here I can search for that quick list. So if I do mid-year for APSRC, it brings back that example. I can see these students across their courses. I can sort their progression. I can look at their pace and performance. I can click on their name to go to those individual gradebooks. And as we talked before, in an individual gradebook, I can click on their assessment. I can check their activity. I can see how they're doing in their stream and to-do list. So it's a really great place to kind of start really exploring that management of student, that progressive management. Now I go back in here and my filter is cleared for me. I can also clear filter at any time. And I have that great information. Now, there's a little checkbox here. It's called critical students. I'm going to go ahead and click that. This is going to filter my view for critical students across all of my courses. Student is identified as critical for overlapping reasons sometimes, or just simply one. Maybe they're behind in pacing, but their performance as well, or maybe they're great on pacing, but their performance is low. So you're going to see those triggers for critical students. Now, here's a really neat thing. Buzz likes to overlap your experience. So if I go back to the dashboard, I'm to home. I'm here in the teacher app home. There is a thing called a dashboard. If you haven't explored it, take the time to explore it. It does let you kind of know how's your grading coming. You'll see here, Lindsay and I are a little slacking here in our performance, but what's really interesting is you can get summative views of your courses. So how many active courses am I associated to? How many of those have critical students? My kids are not doing good right now, but we're going to work on that. I see that I have 24 active students, and of those enrollments are going to be here 111. So if I click on this, so 142, 111 of them are critical, it takes me right back to people. So I can see that overarching view and click right back into those particular critical students. Going back to that dashboard, if I continue down here, I can look at my algebra. I can look at my active students for algebra. It takes me to the people area of just algebra. So you really get that in-depth overview, but being able to keep going into those analytics. Any questions? Lindsay?
So we didn't have any questions on that, Casey, but we did have, Pamela had a question. She said, how can you see assignments when you have assignments not showing for the student? So Pamela, I think it might be easier if you could express verbally to us and just kind of clarify your question a little bit. So I'm just looking to find you so that we can let you unmute. So I have found you. I'm going to go ahead and it looks like you have the ability to unmute now. So go ahead and do that.
I have assignments for, like, I have a year class or a half year class. If when I don't want the students to be able to work on it anymore, I click on my eye. But if I want to go and grade them, or if I want to just see what they've done, I can't. It's no longer there. And it's no longer averaged in their average.
Right. That's a great question. So when I hide an assessment, there's no longer a place for that to go in the gradebook. So it removes it. So hitting the I to not allow them to access it anymore is hiding the content. It's hiding it. It's not counting it. It's like excusing it across the whole course. So we see a couple things happen with that. One, if I do that, it is going to remove from the gradebook. And two, it's going to get stuck in this weird grading limbo, meaning if I have it in my needs graded, but I've hidden it, I go to grade it and there's nowhere for it to go because it's actually removed from the gradebook. So there's nowhere for that grade to point back to because you've hidden it. So Pamela, real quick, is your course a traditional course, meaning you are giving the students the, you're scheduling for them the things and when things are due?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so that gives us a little bit more wiggle room. So in that case, We'll take this for example. If you are done, you don't want your students to go back and submit anymore. Like, hey, you've missed the boat. You no longer get to submit this. Still leave it accessible for them to view. However, I want you to edit the assessment and look at your settings. And if you have that due date, look for the allow late submissions. So if you're like, nope, this is the cutoff date, uncheck the allow late submissions. They can still get to it, but the students that don't make that date won't be able to submit it if that's what you're looking for.
Okay.
Okay, so you want to not allow late submissions. In the case where it's a continuous course, those are made to be soft due dates. There isn't really a late submission. So that's kind of a little bit different approach.
I don't use continuous.
Yeah, just making sure if anybody else was on the call that might, I just wanted to make sure we pointed that out. But yeah, when you use that range, that's one way to do it. If we hide items from the grade book that are graded, it's no longer calculating, it's no longer a point, there's no point factor in the grade book anymore.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. That was a great question. Any additional questions we can help with?
So Casey, there are no other questions in the chat right now that I don't think have been addressed. So if anybody has any other questions and wants to drop them in the chat, we've got a few more minutes left.
And Kathy, I want to check in with you. I think we got through all of the session topics. And again, check out that resource. There are things on there about hiding content, quick tips. I think we even might even mention the needs grading with the hiding, Pamela as well. Finalization, why would we report them? It's all kind of broken down for you guys. But Kathy, is there anything that we may have noted that we missed?
You know, Casey, I believe you covered all of the topics that we wanted to do in the live session, and really encourage everyone to take advantage of that resource document that will be shared out. And it's definitely very useful and links out to other helpful documents. I do know that there is that survey as well that Melody had just put in the chat. So if you have some time, please take the time to complete the survey. It really does help with any sort of your feedback is very valuable, and it helps with our improvements and knowing, gauging where we are and how we can support in other ways. Great work today, Casey. I really, this was a very valuable session.
Thank you. It's a great team. We're happy to work with you. If something else comes up, I know that Melanie and Gina and the rest of the APSRC staff will be in constant contact with. So we'll help troubleshoot any of those. We did have a takeaway on things like Google Docs, as well as adding your own content. And then we need to fix that PDF hyperlink that isn't working. So we'll try to get that turned around over lunchtime on our end. And we'll let the APSRC staff know when that is updated. But if you keep checking it out and refreshing the URL to this APSRC Spring Q&A final document, you'll eventually see that up and working. And I did see there was one final question that came in about having trouble getting into course menu to assign/hide. So just a refresh on that super quick, if I'm understanding the question correctly. Remember, when we're adjusting content, we want to be in the editor. And then if you're going to hide or adjust things, the eyeball is great for hiding. If you're scheduling items to be due in your arranged course, try the scheduling tab. And you can drag and drop, or you can click on the item and edit it. You can also do that in the edit item. So I'm a fan of drag and drop, knowing that if I drag and drop, let me grab something else, that when I click on it, I can also go to the more settings and click edit. And that'll allow me to look at things such as the allow late submission. So by default, that's typically turned off. You typically allow late submissions by default. And if I'm in that editor and I'm looking at that assess it, I can also click the edit, go to that settings tab, and here's where I can also set that due date. So it's just kind of more than one way to get to the same item. And again, if I'm making that customization for a group, just remember to manage your group first, create it. And when you do that edit, this is where it's really important to select that group first, then make those adjustments.
So Lincoln, we appreciate you so much. You've covered so much great information with our team. And we had a really good number of participants on that are all at different levels in engaging with the content and the LMS. So we can't appreciate you enough. So guys, I'm going to pop the information or ask Casey to pop it again at the bottom of the chat for anyone that maybe fell off. We appreciate you. And we want to tell you, if you have any specific questions that you did not get answered, I'm going to put in the box who to reach. I've also put the link to our POC updates that every one of you can have, whether you're a point of contact or not. It's driven at the district and teacher level, and it has all of our APSRC contact information. The problem is we're not in our offices today, as many of you are not as well. So I'm going to put a couple of emails in here so that you can grab them and reach out to us for help. And with that, I appreciate you. This is recorded, so we're going to post it on our website. And Christina is going to push that out to everyone that got the invitation. So you'll have this in your inbox, hopefully later this afternoon. There you go. Appreciate you all. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll continue this great collaborative next week at the same time on Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.